And I'd like to introduce our sixth presentation today, our 13th.
I'm the last one. Hi.
but she is the veteran of the festival. Did we figure out how many years you've been at the festival? 15?
I mean, okay, so I published my first book in 2002, and I think maybe it was a couple years after that I started coming. So I think we could say 15. I think there was 1 year that I couldn't come, and it was like a firestorm.
Yes. Oh yeah. People rose up with pitchforks at the music. Yes. Well, I remember that the first time I met you, you and Jeff had your daughter Ocean in a baby carrier, and she now has her driver's license. So
she does. I know. So that's about right. 15.
So I am very happy to introduce yet again the delightful Lisa Unger. She's a New York Times and internationally best-selling author of 20 novels, including her latest, Secluded Cabin Sleeps 6. Her thriller, Confessions on the 745, is now in development at Netflix, starring with Jessica Alba attached.
Yes.
And
starring and producing.
Yes, starring and producing. With books published in 32 languages and millions of copies sold worldwide, she's regarded as a master of suspense. In 2019, she received 2 Edgar Award nominations, an honor held by only a few authors, including Agatha Christie. And she lives here in Pinellas County. We are always happy to see her at the festival.
And I'm always happy to be in conversation with the amazing Colette Bancroft.
This is the second time we've done it this week.
I know, and I feel like we should put something else in the calendar too, like every month.
Yeah.
Go someplace and just hang out and talk.
We probably should.
Yeah.
You just came back from a book tour. Now, you've always used social media a lot to help market your books and to connect with your readers. You're really skilled at that. And of course, when the pandemic hit, that became essential. And you have used those platforms to sell books over the last couple of years. Was this the first time you've actually gone back out on a book tour since then?
Yeah.
And what was it like?
So basically, starting in March 2020, I, kind of set up a Zoom studio in my office, and then I was basically just there for the next 2 years. So if you've ever seen me on social media, you know about my bookshelf background, and that's where I've done every Zoom and 2 virtual book tours. So the virtual book tour for Confessions on the 745, and then I did a little bit of a hybrid last year for Last Girl Ghosted. It was, live events here locally, and then everything else virtual. They were not putting authors on the road. And then at that time, they kind of were saying, maybe we're not going to be putting authors on the road at all again. And I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. So
I'm glad they changed their minds because
they did change their minds. And and it's funny because I've always considered myself to be an extreme introvert. I know that I don't present that way, but it's just that I'm more nourished by solitude than I am by being out. And so the book tour can be kind of brutal, book tours and conferences and stuff like that. And so I was it was about a few months into the pandemic when I was like, well, maybe I'm not as much of an introvert as I thought. So it was interesting when this year they were like, hey, let's get on the road this year. And I was like, wow, really? Okay, fine. So it was a real old school book tour. So we pre-launched at Tombelow Books on Monday. And today's Saturday, right? Yeah. And so the next morning I was on a flight to Phoenix, and then the morning after that I was on a flight to Houston, and the morning after that I was on a flight to Atlanta at an event every single night. Then from Atlanta we drove to South Carolina. I did 2 events in South Carolina and North Carolina on Friday, and we got up this morning in Charlotte? Yeah. So we got up this morning, woke up this morning in Charlotte at 5 a.m. and got on a plane and came home.
And so were you glad to be back doing that, or?
You know, it was challenging. It's exhausting, but actually, yeah, it was great. Yeah, it was amazing. You know, like just amazing to connect again with booksellers and readers, like, you know, in real life, you know, IRL, and that was really great. You know, I was unexpectedly happy. You know, it's hard to be happy when you're a thriller writer. You have, like, a lot of dark thoughts. So amazingly, I was pretty content on the road.
Well, let's talk about the new thriller, Secluded Cabin Sleeps 6. And I know that your books often grow out of research, that you like doing research, especially into kind of scientific subjects and things like that. And I wondered what kind of research you did for Secluded Cabin Sleep 6, aside from scrolling Airbnb, because, you know, the title sounds like an Airbnb entry, and that's the setting of the book is a luxury vacation that takes a turn.
Of course, a dark turn.
No.
Yeah, so for the last couple of years I've been, you know, I tend to get, like, sort of obsessed about various topics, and that's sort of a lot of my obsession is sort of what drives my fiction. And in this case, it was DNA testing. I've been very interested in this for the last couple of years, not just in the science of it and all that, but also in the way that it has, you know, sort of burgeoned as an industry. Where, you know, 10 or 15 years ago, it was just a very nascent. There was just a very small amount of, you know, sort of effectiveness and reliability with the testing. And then over the, you know, last 15 years, it's just become, you know, more and more accurate and more able to give us more and more information about ourselves. And I find that very interesting, especially, you know, when you turn your saliva over to these companies, like, it's kind of the Wild West. You know, how are they going to use it? There may be some privacy that they guarantee, but, like, how can they guarantee that, right? So much in the way that Last Girl Ghosted kind of focused on online dating, and Confessions on the 745 was very focused on social media and how that, you know, sort of has changed our lives. This, you know, I'm not always so interested in the technology as much as I am in the way the technology is rewriting the way that we relate to each other. And so that was part of the research for Secluded Cabin Sleep 6. It was definitely, you know, an ongoing obsession. And I, you know, there were a few articles that I had read as well that kind of fueled my interest in how it all works for families, and the idea that, you know, if you do test your DNA, the chances are that you're going to find out, and then your family starts doing it, the chances are that you're going to find out something that surprises you.
And it's not always a good surprise.
It's not always good. And once you know it, you can't unknow it. So it's kind of like, it's very layered and very fascinating. So I've been doing a lot of, you know, sort of diving into that, short of testing my own DNA, because I've done too much research.
Yeah.
So now I don't want to do it.
I've actually I haven't done much research, but I have read several crime novels where DNA is an element in the plot. And the more of them I read, the more I see the potential for bad things to happen, for scams, for all sorts of, you know, things that you're not hoping for when you go looking for, well, where was my great-grandma really from?
Yeah, exactly. So you go in there looking for one thing and then you find something else. And what also is interesting is that you may not even put your DNA in, but if your family does, then, you know, they're also giving away information about you, depending on the percentage to which they're related to you. And, you know, the other thing is if you put your DNA in, and, you know, like, it's been ruled unconstitutional, but everybody's heard about the cold case detectives that have put the DNA evidence that was stored from crimes and sent them to these sort of lay testing places like 23andMe, and they may not find not necessarily going to find their suspect, but they could find somebody who's closely related. So you put your DNA in, and all of a sudden, the police are at your door, and they're like, hey, your cousin's a serial killer.
I think the most famous one was the Golden State Killer
exactly
in
right.
California, and they found that they connected to him through the DNA of something like a cousin or an aunt or something.
I mean, exactly.
And that was a good result in that they arrested the serial killer.
Right, and it is a positive result, but like what, did when I sent you my data because I wanted to know, where, my grandma Millie came from, and instead I have the police at my door, like there's a real problem with that, like privacy-wise. So, I mean, I think that it bears a lot of questioning, like did I sign something that said you could give my DNA to the police? And maybe there is all these wonderful privacy concerns in place at these gigantic corporations that are getting richer and richer and richer, because we all know how trustworthy they are, right? So, anyway, so that you can see the way my brain works. So that's kind of, that was kind of the twist of it. But the other thing that really fascinated me about it was that, to learn that when you test your DNA, you're testing 1% of your DNA, because 99% of your genetic material is shared by every other human being on the planet. And I absolutely love that, because it proves, point of fact, that we're all the same. And that when you start digging into where did my family come from, you may see what you expect, like, okay, 50% of my family hails from Italy, 15% of my family hails from Ireland, or 30% hails from Ireland, but then you're going to see as well, these smaller and smaller and smaller percentages. And there's going to be a lot of other places on that map, and what that shows you is that how your family, how your people traveled through the continents to find their way here or wherever it was. And I find that to be very, comforting in a weird way. Yeah.
Well, we've established that you probably won't win 23andMe's Book of the Year award.
Probably not.
No. And the other kind of source of the plot, or base of the plot, is that cabin, that secluded cabin. You're probably not going to get Airbnbs.
Yeah, also Airbnb is not going to be.
Yeah, but I wonder if you could talk about what the moment at which you thought, I know what's would be a terrifying setting for a thriller, a luxury cabin in the Georgia mountains.
Yeah. Well, so during the pandemic, my husband and daughter and I were all really big travelers, and during the pandemic, we were pretty much grounded. So we decided we were going to start exploring, these kind of wooded areas. We went to places like Blue Ridge, Georgia, and Asheville, North Carolina, and, just wanting that, socially distanced vacation so we could, hike and cook and be in a house and all that. And they were beautiful, beautifully appointed, and they were in the woods, and it was so peaceful. But, the problem with vacation is that I have to, take myself with me. It's I don't get to leave, if I could just, take my brain out and put it in a jar, I'd probably be able to relax more, but, I can't, go someplace really restful and idyllic and beautiful like that without, just really spending a lot of time thinking about how it can all go horribly wrong. So I do spend a lot of time thinking about things like that. So we went to these beautiful cabins, and they were wonderful. And then, I wake up at 3 a.m. and some strange noise or some strange motion detector light comes on, and I started thinking things like, so that door code. Does everybody get the same door code, or do they change it for every person? And then, I was sitting out enjoying the outdoor fireplace, very beautiful. I'm sure anyone in this room would have found it very restful. But then this guy comes driving up the road in his gator, and he's this old guy with this long gray hair and a cap, and he's like, sometimes I check in on this cabin for the owners from time to time. And I was like, oh, that's great. That's really great. So those are the kind of things that, kind of stay with me. And then, of course, I start, imagining other things. And then some of these vacations that we took were with my extended family. And I don't know if any of you have traveled with your extended family, but maybe you've also found those trips to be inspirational in some way. So this is kind of all these things, like DNA testing and the extended family on a trip to a mysterious, beautiful and mysterious cabin in the woods, it all kind of just wove itself together into what I hope is a book that'll, keep you up way past your bedtime.
This is your 20th novel. And when you actually worked in the book industry, in the publishing industry before for about 10 years before you published a novel yourself. And when you published that first novel, did you imagine that you would be publishing a 20th novel, much less a 20th bestseller?
Oh my gosh, no. I mean, I've been a writer all my life. I never wanted to do anything else. I never thought of myself any other way. And really early on, my dad was like, yeah, no, that's not a job. Please don't do that. And, and I kind of was like, I knew what I was. My mom's a librarian, and she kind of knew what I was too, but, I believed him, and so when I graduated, even though I started my first novel when I was 19 years old, when I graduated from college, I didn't really have the confidence to pursue that dream, so I went into publishing. And it was really my years in publishing that kind of gave me, permission in a way to be what I am, because I was like, you know what, it is actually a real job, and people are doing it, and I think I can do it too. So I finished my first novel, and, I just kind of had this go for broke moment. I met my husband, Jeff. Hi, honey. I sold my apartment in Brooklyn Heights, and I quit my big corporate job, and I said, I'm giving myself 1 year right to sell this book that I have written and to write another one. And it was a complete go for broke moment, and I really had no expectation that I was going to sell that first book, because I just knew that I knew the industry too well. I knew how competitive it was. I just didn't think it was going to happen, but I was basically buying myself a year to try and write another book that might be better than the first one that I wrote. And so, but I did get signed on pretty quickly by an agent, and she did sell that first book, the one that I started when I was 19. And the one I was writing at the time. So it was a 2-book deal with St. Martin's Press. A tiny, tiny 2-book deal, like a nickel and a cheese sandwich. It was like a don't quit your day job advance, except that I had already quit my day job. So, but it didn't matter, because it was like, a dream come true. I would have done it for free. And my agent said, I don't ever want to hear you say that again. So, when I knew that, the first publishing contract was it's not a windfall. Most of the time it's not. Basically all it is an open door to the writing life. And if you want to walk through that door, you better check your ego and roll up your sleeves and get to work like anything else you want to do well. And so when I walked through that door to the writing life, I was just happy to have an entree at all, right? I was happy to have written a novel. I was happy to be able to write a second one. And I've always kind of been in that space, to tell that, that whatever I was, it was 2002 when I published my first novel, and to think that, I would still be publishing 20 years later, and that most of those books, actually all of them, even the one that was published in 2002, are still in print and still sell. That's a gift. I mean, I'm just, to be honest, just beyond grateful every day that I get to do what I love, because that's everything. Yeah.
And I'm guessing that your current book deals are better than a nickel and a cheese sandwich.
Yes, quite a bit better.
That's good. They should. Your books have all been thrillers, psychological thrillers. and that sort of delve into people's minds and look at characters who are often very dark, and do dark, evil things. Is that always the kind of book you wanted to write, or did you ever entertain the idea of writing other kinds of books?
I never entertained writing any other kind of book. Like, I've always had this really dark and twisted imagination, like, ever since I was a kid. It's not like I'm paranoid because I write thrillers. It's like I write thrillers because I'm paranoid. I just have had this really, sort of questioning nature. And there were some sort of dark things that occurred in my childhood. When I was 15 years old, a girl that I knew at school was abducted and murdered. And it occurred in a very small town, like the kind of place where you move your family from the city to be safe. And she wasn't like a close friend of mine, but we did play together, violin on the school orchestra. And so we were friends, and I knew her. And, after that, that was a horrific event that rocked the entire town, a terrible, terrible tragedy, a crime of, opportunity. And, she's walking home from school. There was a man who had been watching her, and, it should have been fine. Everybody walked home from school. But it just didn't happen to be fine that day. And I had a lot of questions after that. I had a lot of questions about what makes a person able to do such a thing, and then why her, and then how could she be here one day and not be here the next day? And how are we all supposed to just go on as if the world is not completely altered by this event? And so I think that I was a writer already and a reader, and I already had these curiosities and these questions, but it really just kind of amped it up for me, and I really do feel like at that moment the world was one thing before that happened, and then afterwards it was something else, and then those questions, nobody really wants to answer those questions, when they're being asked by a 15-year-old girl. And P.S., I know now, as a mom myself, that a lot of times you can't answer those questions. And if you can't answer a question for your child, maybe you avoid it, or you run away from it, or you change the subject, or you tell that child you're not allowed to ask that question because, you don't want to answer it. So, that's, I think, part of the reason why, I started to perceive a kind of chaos in the world that could not be ordered by my parents. But when I metabolized that darkness onto the page, I found that I could order it there, and that I could dive into character and understand things that, maybe I couldn't understand in the real world. And then it was, I had sort of fallen in love with language, and, by reading Truman Capote, the stories, his vignettes and fictional short stories, Other Voices, Other Rooms, and Music for Chameleons. But then it was In Cold Blood, which I read at a wildly inappropriate age, very, very, very young. But it kind of gave me permission to, made me realize that you could explore the darkness, and you could do it with empathy and compassion and beauty, and in looking at why things happen, you could understand them a little bit better.
Yeah, you're kind of answering those questions you asked when you were 15.
Exactly. And I'm still trying to answer them.
Right.
Because there are no easy answers.
No, there aren't. There
Yeah.
aren't. But your books certainly explore that in meaningful ways. Yeah. The main character in Secluded Cabin, Hannah, is, you said you don't write thrillers, you're not paranoid because you write thrillers because you're paranoid. Is Hannah a little bit you?
She is. So Hannah is a little bit me. All your characters are a little bit you, and nobody's anything like you. That's just fiction, right? But I was really interested in Hannah because, she's a new mom. And I was remembering when I was a new mom how, all the, paranoid and fearful thoughts that I had before I was a mom were just it was a new level, right? It was just brand new terror. So I had a lot of places to explore after that, too. And I was just interested in her as like being a new mom, leaving her, you know, baby behind for the first time, right? Like, so that was interesting. I was interested in her role in her family. So Hannah's role in her family, like we all have our scripts, right, from our family of origin. Like you have your role and you play that role, and if you stop playing that role, it's chaos because nobody else knows what their lines are if you don't give them back yours. And so I was interested in that, like she's the good girl, right? Mako's the larger than life, you know, tech mogul, always in trouble, you know, super smart, but you know, not always a good guy. And she just, you know, she loves him, she adores him, and she is like sort of in her family, like she's the one who makes things right. She's the one who does the, you know, who does the cleanup. She's the crime scene cleanup, right? and she's that way for her friend too, Cricket. So like in the book she talks about herself as like, you know, Captain Safety. Or like she's the one that's like, don't run on the pool deck. You know? Or like the one that everybody calls when it's like, you know, oh, I woke up in an apartment, I don't know where I am, can you come get me? You know, like she's the person that you call. And so yeah, I think I do relate to that a little bit.
And she's also the one who's, even before they get to the cabin, she's the one who's obsessing about,
yes.
you know, cell service, Wi-Fi, are we gonna, you know,
right.
And of course they're not gonna have those things.
Right.
But she's the one who imagines the bad things happening.
That's right.
Yeah.
And also like that sort of terror of being away from your child for the first time, like all of a sudden, and like the Wi-Fi is important to Bruce and to Mako because they need to work, but it's important to her because it's her lifeline to her baby. Like she has a camera, you know, where she's watching all the time, and like when the Wi-Fi goes out, she no longer can see, you know, her baby in her in her crib, and those are the things I think that, you know, most moms.
And I want to say that the baby is staying with Hannah's mother-in-law. They didn't just leave her at home.
Yeah, they just leave her at the crib. No, there was a caretaker, definitely.
We're going to go to questions in just a minute, but I wanted to ask you about the status of the TV series based on Confessions on the 745, and where that's at, and what kind of involvement with it you have.
Yeah, so Confessions on 745 was optioned by Jessica Alba, and she and her production team took it to Netflix, and it's now in development. They were able to sign on Charisse Castro-Smith to write, and she's an Oscar-winning writer of, probably everybody knows her from Encanto. She wrote Encanto. And she also wrote The Haunting of Hill House, which is a remake that's on Netflix. I don't know if anybody's seen that, but it's actually kind of brilliant. I mean, it's really dark, very sad, so, you know, obviously perfect for me.
Interesting range for a writer. You know?
That's what I was thinking too. It's kind of weirdly perfect, right? Because like I've probably watched Encanto about 500 times, you know, and The Haunting of Hill House has been, you know, a big inspiration for me as a writer as well. So I mean, it's kind of a weirdly perfect union of perspectives. Maybe between those two things we'll wind up with something really interesting. So yeah, so apparently there is, the last I heard, there is a script, and so Jessica Alba is making her notes, and then I guess Netflix will make their notes, and then eventually I'll get to see it, and then I'll make my notes, and then, you know, of course they'll probably ignore everything I say, and just make whatever it is they want to make. And I had some really deep conversations with the production team before she started to write about how I saw it, visioned it, structured. You know, would it be flashbacks or would it be a dual timeline and stuff like that. So we did have a lot of those early preliminary conversations, and they have said that they do want me to be involved, and I am an executive producer. But I mean, ultimately, you know, they're going to do what they want.
Yeah.
I mean, we all know that, right? So we just have to hope that what they do is great. Yeah.
We have great material to work from.
Thank you.
So let's hope. Shall we see, are there any questions from the audience? We have a couple of microphones set up if you'd like to ask a question.
Are you guys going to be shy? Really? Okay.
While you're on the subject of that Netflix possibilities, if you could choose to cast it, who would you select?
Oh gosh, that's such a hard question. It's so hard to find. I mean, I think that in some ways, Jessica Alba is the perfect Selena. I mean, she really is. She's like that kind of, Selena in the book is like a very, she's like a beautiful young mom. She's got this like sort of perfect life, a husband and her 2 children, a beautiful house, a big job. And she's like, but she's, she kind of thinks of herself as being like Instagrammable, like that's how she thinks of her life. And so, she has this, very beautiful sort of facade that she puts out for the world, but underneath there's all these layers. And I kind of see Jessica Alba in that way. Like she, when I met her on Zoom, which was like unbelievably cool. I was totally fangirling. Jeff and Ocean were trying to like get up into my office so that they could see her too. I was just amazed at how, because she has a very bubbly persona, but she had such a deep understanding of the book and the characters, and it had really resonated for her, and she had so many like really great insights and into how she viewed the role and how she felt like it was a real role that she could kind of dig her teeth into. And so I'm really excited to see her as Selena. But as for everybody else, like it's such a hard question. Like I don't really think like there's my characters exist for me in such a very real way that everybody else is like, I never think about like, oh, this one's, this could be Bradley Cooper. Okay, let's do Bradley Cooper. Actually, because he's just so cute. So whatever, he could be in it. And Jake Gyllenhaal, I think, would make a good Graham. Because he's got kind of that like hapless darkness. Like he's got that kind of like, he seems like really sweet, but he's just, in that way that men are, sorry. So yeah, I'll keep thinking about it.
I kind of get the feeling, I get the feeling that it was easy for you to relinquish, I guess, is that kind of a good word for what you have to do when you hand it over to someone, a producer, that you felt comfortable with her and what she was planning and her ideas, and it was like you had this trust with her. Kind of like, it reminds me of Sister Helen Brazian when she gave her story for Dead Men Walking.
Right.
People would ask her, did they do it justice? And, yes, and then some. I kind of get that you have that same sense of trust with her. Or are you feeling, I know that's really personal, but
no, it's good.
do you feel, is there any hesitation at all? Do you feel a little bit of...
I actually don't feel any hesitation. I mean, I do trust the team. I do think I think she's an amazing businesswoman, and I think she's a great actress, and I think she's only just started to be a great actress. Like, and by that I mean like she's grown and evolved on the screen, and in front of all of us. And I think that she's got, the bigger roles, the deeper she gets, the better she's going to be, like all of us, right? And so I think there's something about her that is, I felt very, very confident in her immediately. And Cherise Castro-Smith is just such an amazing writer, and so I feel like, they're such powerhouses, both of them. Like I just felt like very, grateful that they connected in that way to the source material. And I feel like there's a thing about the book, right? Like when I write my first draft, like that's that life for that book. And then the second draft and the third draft, like they're different from the first draft. Then there's a draft that I turn into my editor, and there's another, and then she gives me her editorial changes, and I write another draft, and then once again, it's another life for that book. And then it goes out into the world, and my reader has it and reads it, and then they have an experience with that book, and then that's another life for that book. Likewise, when when the person who does the audiobook starts to narrate it, she gives it another life. She brings herself into it, and so that experience is different. So I think that you have to respect the process. My book is always going to be my book. That's what I wrote. What they create from that book is theirs. It belongs to them. If they want me to be a part of it, I think I could be an asset. But if they don't, then I really can't do anything about that. So I just have to hope for the best. Yeah.
Since you have 20 books, do you have any other books being optioned? And can you explain the option process for authors?
Yeah, absolutely. I've had a lot of options over the years. This is the furthest we've ever been, like in terms of having a star, a production company, and a script. So this is the farthest I've been. I've had other options that have expired. I've had people that, I felt like we're going to do it, we're going to do a good job. But, it's kind of like, it's such vapor, like you just never know how things are going to go. You just kind of, you get a call from your film agent, just ask for, how it works. And they say, it might be, in one case it was, the Hallmark Channel. One time it was Lifetime. One time it was, a director, Gary Fleder, who wanted to do In the Blood. It's been, a writer at one point wanted to option. So they all get their option, meaning they pay money to spend a year or however much you contract for to try to make it into something, to try to sell it to a company. And so that's just basically a year of waiting to see if they can do it, and probably they can. I mean, 90% of the time they can't do it. And so that's just, it's so, for me, like, I'm the writer of novels. I'm a novelist. And so I write my books, and I'm happy to be able to write my novels and to publish them, and that's what I do. So everything else is just kind of, we'll see, yeah.
I just wanted to go back to what you said about your dad telling you that writing wasn't a real job.
Oh, yeah.
A little bit about, and I don't mean it prior to your age, but generationally, how women have been encouraged, and then how you see women kind of falling back.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? How
you, when your dad said writing isn't a real job, and, how old you were at that time, where women were at that time, and then how you gained your confidence, and then how you see women being encouraged at this time.
Yeah, it's definitely changed. I mean, at that time, I was a teenager, and I'm 52. Is that how old I am? Yeah, I'm 52. So somebody else would need to do the math. But I don't think it was so much that my dad wasn't encouraging me because I was a girl. He was encouraging me because he thought I was too smart to try to pursue a career in the arts. He wanted me to do something that actually was like a guaranteed way to make money, like that was his thing. And so, but I don't know if he would have given, I'm pretty sure he would have given the same advice to my brother. I think he would have said the same thing to him. But yeah, of course, the world is in flux for women. We could get real political about that, about how things are better and how things are worse and how things stay the same, and how we've evolved and how our relationships with the men in our lives have evolved. But, I think that, and I believe this because my daughter is, now she's 16, and I see her as being somebody who feels that she can do anything that she wants to do. I was given that gift by my mom and my dad as well. I mean, I always paint my dad as like the villain just because he's fun to do that too, especially when he's in the audience. He really likes it. But they both supported me in different ways and encouraged me in different ways. And the advice of if you want to write, get a real job. It's not bad advice. It's not bad advice to work hard at another job while you're learning while you're writing or trying to write that first novel, because writing is a job, and having a big job teaches you how to how to have that work ethic that you're going to need for, you know, for the writing life. So I think that, you know, I do feel that we're, you know, hopefully for my daughter who's a Gen Z girl, you know, I hope the world becomes an ever better place for women, and that they, you know, that we're moving towards the light in all things. So even though it might not be a linear path to the light, I do believe that that's the general trajectory.
So when you were first starting to write, and you first started down the road of being a thriller writer, did you ever write something that then you thought, oh, I can't share that with my family, that's just too dark, that's too... And how did you then evolve from that? Because I assumed that there had to be something.
Well, you know, here's the interesting thing, and this still happens. Like when I write with a different part of my brain. Like the person that sits down to write is not the person that gets up and like makes a tuna fish sandwich or like goes to, you know, pick up my daughter on car line. It's not the same brain. And so what that means is, you know, I write things and I don't ever, there's no consciousness in that moment that that thing is going to be published. Even now, when I know for a fact that unless something goes wrong, that it's going to be published, I'm definitely not thinking about, is this going to offend somebody? Is this too dark? Is this wrong to write about this? Is this a place where I said I wouldn't go and I have gone? Yes, a lot. But like I'm not thinking about any of those things. So it's only afterwards when the book is written that I look at it and go, ooh, that's going to be bad. My mom's not going to like that. And, you know, and also like, you know, there have been times when, you know, people have seen themselves in my work, you know, and not been too happy about it. Which is funny because, like, I could never base a character on a person and then live with that character for a year, right? Like, there may be a spark or a piece of somebody. I mean, of course, there's pieces of everybody in my life and my work. Like, my poor husband, I'm constantly skewering him on the page one way or another. And myself, you know, all of that. But, like, you know, people will see the book and be like, you know, oh, is it me or is it, you know, whatever? No. I mean, I always think, how arrogant that you think I would write a book about you. I mean, don't you know that it's all about me? So yeah, I mean, it's kind of a different brain. So then, and then a lot of times it just, you know, it's out there in the world before anybody is like, you know, has a problem with it, and then it's like, it's too late.
Does Ocean read your book?
Yeah, she has started reading my books. And that is really a head trip, because, you know, for a long time, I just was like, you know, she didn't really have any interest. I never stopped her from reading it, but she didn't really have any interest, and then all of a sudden, all her friends were reading. And she was like, can I read? I'm like, I guess. I'm like, they're really dark. She's like, yeah, okay, you know, that's fine. She's like, I watched Twilight, you know, I'm like, okay. You know, and so she started reading, and so we have these, like, book discussions, which is kind of amazing. It's kind of amazing, and she's an amazing reader, you know, and she has a lot to say, and, you know, I feel like it's kind of an interesting thing, that another thing that, you know, happens that, like, I didn't think about it. Like, she, you know, will have this body of work, right? And I feel in a lot of ways, like, that she could find almost every piece of me somewhere, you know, in those novels, because every book has been, like, deeply personal to me, you know, all my writing life. And so, like, if that's an interesting, like, again, that's another life for those books. Like, what does my daughter read when she reads what I've written? Yeah.
Well, on that note, I think we're going to wrap up.
Okay.
And Lisa will be downstairs signing Secluded Cabin Sleep 6, and I think some of her other books are down there too.
I think every Lisa Unger book that you want is down there, and even some that you don't, and you should buy them anyway for Christmas gifts. Some of them are wrapped already.
And I want to thank her very much for extending her tour one more stop to be
My
with us.
pleasure. I wouldn't miss